Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. Today I have with me in the studio a gentleman. He's no stranger to Albany State University. We're very fond of him and certainly appreciative of the expertise that he brings in support of the foundation, and we have a collaboration with him that we are super excited about. It's been going on for a little bit over a year now, and so he came back just to check on us and again lend his knowledge and to help the university advance. He's none other than Mr. Andy Cole. How are you today?
Good, very good, Wendy.
Good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Always excited to have you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led up to your role with the Wallace Foundation, and then we'll talk about the actual collaboration that we have with Albany State University.
Okay, well, Wendy, about a few years ago, I was the Director of Employee Performance and Development in Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, and I won a $5 million grant from the Wallace Foundation. And so I've just actually been evolving ever since, and that grant focused on the development of pipeline, a principal pipeline. So after I left the school system, I then started working with the foundation. And Wallace is a large foundation. It's actually outgrowth of Reader's Digest. Okay. So it used to be called the Reader's Digest Fund. It's now the Wallace Foundation. It's a large foundation, about $1.6 billion. And they focus on several things: arts and education leadership. And so part of this process has been an ongoing process for me in developing my personal career, as well as developing with the foundation on different initiatives. And so the exciting initiative is the University Principal Preparation Initiative that Albany State is a part of.
Absolutely. And so, again, we were excited to receive the support, and I believe we're going into have we just completed our first year cycle, or it's a little bit longer?
Yeah, actually the first year is actually, I think, about 16 months.
Okay.
So it's not actually a year. We call it the first year, but it's actually a little bit longer. Okay. And it's actually started almost 2 years ago when Wallace did an environmental scan and looked for universities that had the capacity to make significant changes, and those changes around their principal preparation program and their willingness to re-engineer their programs and work with partners.
Sure.
And so Albany was one of the 26 universities that were invited to come to New York City to hear about the initiative and to be invited to apply. And they applied, and now we're here.
Outstanding. Let's speak to our layman or our novice viewers out there as it relates to the importance of educational leadership. Why the Wallace Foundation saw fit to, this is something that we want to focus on, and how does this better serve our academic entities across the country?
Okay, that's a great question. One of the reasons that Wallace is focused on education leadership is just numbers. There's hundreds and thousands of teachers, but those teachers are impacted even greater by principals. And so the return on investment for working with principals is actually, you get a lot more from that. And the research has told us that really teacher retention and student achievement are achieved by really highly active and highly effective principals in each school, especially for kids that need it the most. So for economically disadvantaged kids, they need actually more focus and more leadership in their schools. So that's the reason why Wallace has begun to focus on that.
Great. We have a great education program here, as you know. I'm sure that's one of the reasons why Albany State was invited to the table.
Absolutely.
Right. So, supplemental, if you will. Certainly we provide all the mechanics and the components in terms of developing those educational leaders. And once they've advanced and they find themselves in the principal roles, what type of guidance does the Wallace Foundation then provide, or development, if you will, to Albany State University, and ask that they then feed or help in partnering with those principals?
Well, the main ingredient of the work and the strength of actually Albany State is in partnership.
Okay.
And they've been partnering with districts around the area, and those districts have aligned their work with Albany's development of principals. So we're going to get hopefully a through line from the work that Albany does through to the work that the districts do, to the principals, and then eventually to the students that they're going to be serving. Sure. So I think that the strength of this program has been the robustness of the partnerships. So you have the partnerships within Albany State. So there's a lot of people involved within the university, not just in the groups that are working directly with the program, but also just in support of the program. And then you have these districts that have signed on to be a part of this process. And then you have the state, who actually has been an active and engaged partner in working with Albany State. So the strength of this program is really the partnership, the strength of all the programs that we have, and we have 7 other universities involved, but specifically the strength of Albany State has been the robustness of the partnership that they've been able to develop.
Very good. Let's, I'm curious to learn of your opinion on this, and certainly you've had a role in the educational process, K through 12, and then with higher ed as well. And as you mentioned earlier, many areas around the country are addressing the needs, or attempting to address the needs, of underserved populations. And that expands or intensifies, you will, the whole educational process. How has that evolved, for better or worse, over the years, in your opinion? Certainly the Wallace Foundation is playing a critical role in that. And if it has not gotten any better, what are some of the steps that you all particularly are taking place in addition to this initiative?
Well, I think some of the work has gotten much better over time. So if you take 20 or 30 years ago, you would have a gym teacher that was designated as a principal because supposedly they knew discipline and they knew how to manage the school. But over the course of time, we really started to focus on instructional leadership, and I think that's the biggest change that's gone on over the last few years. But specifically, understanding how different kids learn differently, and setting an environment in which kids can learn. That's especially important for kids that have more needs.
Yes.
So the more needs you have, the more ability you need in a principal. And so I think the other thing is to being really clear on what it means to be an instructional leader is really, I think, the most critical change over the last few years.
Okay, outstanding. And so this relationship, this partnership with Albany State University, let's share with our viewers what that will specifically entail. The timeline, in terms of, you all have infused certainly some talent and some guidance. Is there some financial support that has been provided?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of financial support given. We anticipate, I think it's about $4.5 million.
Very good.
To the university over the next few years. That focus, some of that money goes directly into the university, some of it is working with the state, some of it is working with the districts. But I think, and I've heard this often, that what Wallace brings to the table is money, obviously, but it's also the networking opportunity and the availability to get resources to bear on the work that's being done. So besides the work that's provided, the money that's provided and resources provided to Albany State, they're also providing some partners. And so the Gwinnett County has been working with Albany. The New York City Leadership Academy has been working with Albany State. The EDC, Education Development Center, has been working. So there's a lot of different organizations that are working that actually Albany doesn't have to pay for.
Very good.
They're actually brought in, and we provide some resources that are non-direct funded resources, but I think are an advantage. I think the other thing is the opportunity to network with the other 6 universities.
Excellent.
And so each one was chosen for different strengths. And so when you put them all together, people get an opportunity to actually interact with other universities in like work. So for instance, next month they'll be going to Denver, and there's a faculty professional learning community that will be engaged in. There's a state professional learning community that has 7 states involved in this work.
Great.
There's also a combined professional learning community that happens it's twice a year in New York City, where everybody's engaged with the work. So besides the direct resources, there's also indirect resources that are provided.
That's critical, and oftentimes we lose sight of that, the value and the importance of that. We approach initiatives or endeavors with the mindset that we have to start from scratch, reinventing the wheel, and there are some best practices that already exist. So again, the value and the importance of partnering and collaborating with like entities is important. When you were speaking earlier, I was reminded of the author Jonathan Kozol, who wrote Savage Inequalities. And that was one of the takeaways that I think a lot of educational systems were able to come away with, that there are entities or organizations or systems just like mine having similar challenges, and so what were they able to then do to improve, and thus the partnerships and the linking up. So that's key.
Yeah, it is, and each university has a different context.
Okay.
But what's similar is that there's similar challenges in making sure that they produce people capable of making change. And I think that when they sit down and talk with each other, they're actually seeing how challenging that is, but also how doable it is.
Sure.
And so it's an exciting when they get together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we wrap up, share with the viewers what you relate your passion for education has been. You certainly could have said, I'm going to, sit back and relax after the K through 12 experience, and then when the Wallace Foundation then tapped you and said, hey, we need your expertise. So, but there was something that made you say yes. Well,
yeah, I think my own personal background.
Okay.
I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we had some challenges as I was growing up, and we had good people involved in education and some not so good.
Yes.
And I actually was involved in a rather segregated environment, and in thinking through of how I made it and how some of my friends didn't.
Sure.
It was that we're actually smarter than I was. The luck of the draw isn't good enough.
Indeed.
We have to have a systemic way of supporting education.
Yes.
And it can't be, if you get a certain teacher or if you get a certain principal or you're in a certain school, everybody has to have that capacity to fulfill their ambition and goals in life. And so that became a passion for me, and leadership, because I see the difference that leadership makes. It makes a significant difference in the work that everybody does, regardless of the field, regardless of the level. It's interesting. one of the things that's very, very interesting about schools is that I've never seen a great school that was dirty. When you have a great school, everybody rises.
That's right.
Everybody in the group rises, and that's true also in every endeavor. When you have a team, everybody is great on the team, as opposed to, we have, these random acts of greatness.
Right. So the aesthetics play a role, the pride that people take in their role or their responsibilities and their respective positions certainly factor in. You reminded me when I was probably in the maybe second or third grade, and I attended a parochial school. There was always a young man, and he stopped in maybe the fourth or fifth grade, and I don't remember his last name, but interesting enough, I remember his first name, and his name was Aaron. And he was always just the student that just the teacher had to give him attention because he was just all over this behavioral issues. So when you mentioned the leadership, I was struck by, in fact, it was Sister Carol that taught the class. But he was extremely disruptive. The reason he was extremely disruptive is because he was bored. And she had the foresight to say, something's going on here. But what was actually, in fact, going on is he was tested, and it was discovered that he was a gifted student. And how often does that play out in classrooms? But there are no Sister Carols, or there are no leaders that will then take the time to say, let's do a little investigation to find out what we're actually dealing with. And so how many children have then been lost in the system, not in fact because they have behavioral issues that we either don't want to deal with or address or figure out what the catalyst is for that. And so that the cure for whatever is then lost because we did not focus, or someone did not take a leadership role to then focus and try to identify what was actually going on with that student.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that plays out not just with kids, but adults too. So if people don't recognize people's talent, people start acting out.
Yes.
And they feel like they're put in a hole somewhere, and they start acting out in different ways. And I think that's the real challenge, is seeing talent in all of its different forms.
Sure.
Also in its developmental form. So we've gotten to a point in our society that we're more ATM. Everything's instant. You're absolutely right. So if you don't show potential instantly, then we don't think you have it. But I think that the real talent for leadership is being able to see talent in all of its different forms, and to be able to bring it out and help it grow and develop. It's easy. It's really easy to do that with kids or adults that already show all their potential. But there's a whole lot of people that takes a little more time, and they need a little more support. And I think that's the challenge for leadership.
Sure. The other element that's also key is, if you see it, then you as an individual, as a leader, have to be comfortable with helping to bring that to fruition and not be intimidated or threatened by that. That happens a lot of times when people they're not true leaders, but they hold leadership roles.
Yes.
And because of those factors, then I'm going to stifle your development. So I'm sure that's part of the whole educational process as well.
That's especially true for gifted kids or people.
Yes.
People get afraid of their giftedness, and can't actually manage it. And so, and by manage it, I mean, it's not routinized. It's very different. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of doing things. And people sometimes don't like different.
Sure.
They like things to be the same, cookie cutter.
I know, yeah.
Because it makes our work easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, the resistance to change is very real.
Yeah.
And it's and I get it to a certain degree because it's the unknown. How will that then affect me? Which speaks to the importance of constantly developing yourself to make yourself viable and relevant, whatever the environment is.
And that's why I have a job, because things are different. And so, so being able to see the difference is part of my job.
Sure. Well, you obviously do it very well. How long have you been with Wallace Foundation now?
Actually, in this iteration, about 7 years.
Okay, good. Well, we're excited. We thank you for all that you do in support of Albany State University, and I know the Wallace Foundation is certainly proud of what you've been able to achieve for them as a representative. And so I could talk to you all day long, but as you and I discussed earlier, they've got a heavy slate of meetings and activities for you. Lou, try to take advantage of your presence here today. But thank you on behalf of Albany State University for what you do. Certainly the contributions of the Wallace Foundation in helping us to kind of navigate this whole educational process in Southwest Georgia.
Thank you, Wendy. As always, I enjoy talking with you.
Same here. It's always know that you're welcome back.
Thank you.
Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'll see you next time.